Would you look at that? That is an odd and interesting array of cutlery, isn't it? Well, there's a method to my madness. Stay tuned, guys. We'll have a little knife talk. Hi gang, Rob here. It's the evening of 17 December 2013. And yes, there is a method to my madness. Why I have this rather odd and interesting array of knives on the table. And somewhere in the middle of all this, there's going to be a knife review, or at least a first impressions video. Let's see. Let's talk a little history, shall we? Let's start at the present and work our way backward. You know, we live in the, I guess some might say, a golden age of folding knives, don't we? We've got over a broad spectrum of pricing. We've got these modern, slickly built, slick operating, well-constructed knives that go in our pockets made of modern space age materials that are sort of impervious to wear and weather. And we have these super steels that don't rust and take keen edges and hold them for a long time. And blade grinding technology has never advanced more maybe than it has in the last 20 years or so. And so there are a lot of guys who see a reason every day to leave the house with a knife, and maybe tens of thousands of them in the United States alone. And most of those guys are going to carry a knife like this, the Ontario Rat Model 1, like a 3 5/8 inch drop point blade in Aus 8 steel, and a fiberglass reinforced nylon handle, stainless steel liners, liner lock. Quick to deploy, affordable to own. Every man can have one of these, $30-35. Dudes carry knives, don't we? And you know what? For every 10,000 or so people who carry a knife like this Ontario, or maybe a Chinese-built Kershaw, or a Spyderco Tenacious, working man's knives, every man's knives, Cold Steel, American Lawman, and knives like that. For every 10,000 or so of those guys who know they need to carry a knife, but it's just a tool. It's just something that's got to fit in a budget. For every 10,000 or so of those guys, there's the guy that owns one of these. Titanium handles, CPM S35 VN blade, everything about it super precise, very expensive. Not everybody can own a Chris Reeves Sebenza. Not everybody should own a Chris Reeves Sebenza, and very few of us appreciate them enough to shell out the $400 plus it takes to own one. But you know what? This craze is not new. It may have taken on a new form here in the late 20th, early 21st century. But the guys who appreciate finer things have always been around the knife world. Yeah, they have. Let me show you what I mean. This knife is a case, 3-bladed Stockman, medium size. Some people might call it a dogleg jack. Every man's knife, but a sort of a high quality every man's knife. Back in the day, when everybody carried a multi-bladed slip joint. The case knife was maybe the Spyderco Endura of its day, or the oh gosh, let's say maybe it was the maybe it's the Spyderco Sage of its day. You know, a little pricier than your average dime store knife, well constructed. Most guys might have carried something like this, a Hammer brand Peanut. This particular knife made sometime between 1945 and 1955 on the East Coast, either in Rhode Island or New York, it's hard to tell. Probably purchased at a hardware store for $1.50 or something. You know, it would open your mail, maybe break down your box, clean out your fingernails, stuff guys needed a knife to do. And then, you know what? There were guys who appreciated something like this, with stag antler scales and nickel silver bolsters, and maybe some exotic Damascus steel in its blades, like this old Parker Edwards. Was it the Sabenza of its time? I don't know, but maybe. And there, you know, there were some other brands. Queen Cutlery, a notch above case. And then there were these little boutique makers, weren't there? One out of Gladstone, Michigan, used an arrowhead as their logo. Northwoods Knives. A guy named David Shirley ran that little sort of custom shop of traditional knives. David died a few years ago. In the later years, not only was he making his own designs, but he was reproducing some William Skagel traditional designs. They had a thumb slot all the way through the blade instead of just a nail nick. Northwoods ceased production shortly after David's death, and that story isn't over. We're going to get to this. So why this story on a cold, blustery, snowy night in Northeast Indiana on the Apostle P channel? Well, I'll tell you. If you guys are knife nuts, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. Our tastes change, and they go in cycles, and they evolve over time, don't they? And of late, I've kind of been desiring to have smaller, more highly finished, let's say jewel-like knives as part of my EDC rotation. And some of you may know, who follow me closely and maybe talk to me outside of YouTube, I have on order, after the purchase of my large Sabenza 21 left-handed, I have on order a small Sabenza 21 Insingo left-handed. It'll be number 11 small Insingo left-handed in the history of small Insingos. Not too many lefties like that blade shape, I guess, but I do. So Chris Reeve Knives has an order from me that should be filled in April. I wanted something smaller, more economical in pocket, and I love the utility of that Insingo blade, believe it or not. I was not a sheep's foot or Wharncliffe guy, but some guy from Arizona has sort of converted me. I think his name is One All's Pub or something like that. Yeah, you know who you are, John. Anyhow, while I'm waiting, I thought, you know, I gotta satisfy my Chris Reeve craving, and I want something small and cool, and I came across the Omnundi. This particular wearing the ebony scales, and it is left-handed. And I have loved carrying this knife so much that it started to take me back to my roots. I was talking on the phone with Campfire Talk a couple weeks ago, and he had watched my Omnundi video, and he said, you know, it's sort of like a blending of two worlds in two times. It's, you know, modern mechanics titanium frame lock, Chris Reeve bushing pivot, but with the look of that classic traditional gentleman's folder. And by the way, Campfire Talk told me not to open the knife this way. He said, you know what, Rob, just use the nail nick like it was intended to be used. Slow down. Embrace the traditional. And usually when Campfire Talk says something like that, I need to listen. And I did. So as for the duration of this video at least, I will not open this knife one-handed. I'm not even going to close it one-handed. But his little lecture, his admonishment, his rebuke didn't go unnoticed. And as I'm waiting for my small Sebenza to be built, I found myself going back to my roots. These are knives I've had for a while. Well, actually, this case is a this year purchase. But these two, this little Peanut and this Parker Edwards Trapper, I've had for decades. And I was a traditional knife guy. That's all we had when I started collecting knives. You've seen my Buck 110 video, and those are my roots. And I thought, I really want something that just slips in my pocket, that's traditional, with some high quality materials, that is going to take some effort to open, and you have to take your time with, and it's going to make you appreciate the daily tasks that a guy uses a knife for. And I'm going to have a level of appreciation that only a knife guy can have. As I get out of the picture some of the distractions. So, I had watched a video that's a few months old from Randy at Solo's Knife Reviews, and he featured a knife like this, but not quite. Same model, different materials. I had not heard of Northwoods Knives. I didn't know anything about its history. And during Randy's review, or sort of showcase of this knife, the Northwoods Fremont Jack, he gave a brief history of at least the last few years of the Northwoods name and what had happened to it. And it's a pretty cool story. When David Shirley died, the Northwoods Knife Company sort of ceased to exist. And we are living in a time that's pretty cool. You know, yes, we've got all these modern tactical blades, and they get more high-tech, and you might make the case they get stupider as time goes by. You know, now we've got these tank titanium frame lock knives that weigh 7 and 8 ounces, and they've got blades that are 1/4 inch thick, and they won't cut anything. And although they're quote-unquote overbuilt, some of them have these tiny little pivots and 2 screws holding them together, and they ride on dainty little ball bearings, so they flip well. I mean, this modern tactical thing is maybe getting a little silly. I wanted to do something not silly. And I'm not the only one, because we've got these companies springing up. The new Northwoods Knives, and I'll explain how that goes here in a minute. And then we've got a company that's really on fire, Great Eastern Cutlery, in Titusville, Pennsylvania. One sort of knife collector, aficionado, a patron of knife art, and then the guy who was a designer and maker for Queen Cutlery for many years, started Great Eastern Cutlery with the idea of building traditional knives that were extremely high quality from extremely high quality materials. They trained their own workforce of craftsmen. They're not the only ones. And then on the other side of the country is this guy named Derrick Bohn, who's the proprietor of a web-based knife retailer called KnifeShipFree.com. I highly recommend you visiting Derrick's site, and I'll put a link down in the description. And even giving him a call. I did before I bought this knife. He's a great guy. He'll be happy to talk with you. His inventory on the website is real time. So if you see a picture of a particular knife on his website, it's in stock. Really cool. And he purchased the Northwoods Knives name. And he's used, over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 different makers to make the Northwoods product line. I believe Canal Street Cutlery has made some, and maybe another one. And then the current offerings, this one is Derrick's design, I believe, manufactured by Great Eastern Cutlery for KnifeShipFree for Northwoods. And here is the knife. And isn't this cool? No box. This comes in a Ziploc bag with an identifying stock tag. And then this is the box. And Derrick calls this his moccasin. It's not only a decorative presentation holder for the knife, it's also a pretty darn good little pocket slip. Just folds over in an envelope fashion with the tab retained by this little belt. Open the flap, squeeze the sides, knife slides into your hand. How cool is that? And here's the knife. Just look at this, guys. I'm just going to bring this up close. Let my camera focus. And take a look at that, would ya? Gorgeous, smooth nickel silver bolsters, riveted construction. The arrowhead shield is pinned into the sort of jade green dyed camel bone scales. Fit and finish are impeccable. In talking to Derrick, I went with this camel bone not only because I think it's beautiful and goes so well. If you look at the flats near the spine of this blade, see how the oxidation from heat treat is left on the flats? Almost looks like color case hardening on gun parts, doesn't it? It's not rough. The knives are pre-ground before heat treat, obviously. It's not like it's forging scale or hot roll material. It's just a little heat treat scale. But doesn't it look cool next to that camel bone? And I chose the camel bone, and the offerings available as far as scale material are calico cow bone, which is sort of a yellowy, creamy, speckled, or there's some variation in the color of each scale. And then this camel bone, and then stag antler handles, and then elephant ivory, and when it's available, mammoth ivory. Now the knife that I saw on Solo's Knife Reviews was an elephant ivory version, and it was stunning. Those were on about $175. I think I paid $120 for this camel bone version. And it wasn't really a price. I had sold some knives, as you guys know, sort of to prepare for this purchase. Yeah, this is the knife that was the reason for that 5-knife sale last week or 2 weeks ago. This is what I wanted to buy, and I really had intentions of buying the camel bone or the elephant ivory version. And in talking to a couple guys, I just didn't feel like I wanted an elephant tusk scaled knife in my collection. It was all legal pre-ban ivory, but those elephants were probably poached, and I just didn't feel the need to have that. So I went with this one, and I think it's got a character all its own that I really like. If you take a look at around the edges of this knife, just beautifully finished. Beautifully finished. Great transitions from scale to bolster. Not dead smooth. You can feel the transition, but visually there are no gaps anywhere where scale meets bolster or spine. A superbly constructed knife. Let's take a look at this blade. And this thing is a stunning blade. Check this out. Super positive half stop. A gorgeous, rather sinister looking modified Wharncliffe blade of, wait for it, 1095 plain carbon steel. Yeah. Built in 2013, a traditional American folding knife slip joint with a 1095 blade. Yeah, this one's brand new and you're seeing a glint from the main bevel. But as this knife ages, it's going to turn gray and get black spots. And excuse me, guys. Got a little frog in my throat. Yeah, look at that thing, though. Gorgeous swedge as it sweeps down to that super keen point. Handle on this knife is, I guess, about 3 3/4 inches long. What do you think? Maybe 7/16 thick. And the blade is not super long. It's just 2 5/8 inches long. Made from what appears to be probably 1/8 stock, and it's before it's ground. Pretty beefy. And look at the shape of that handle. It's got that sort of sleeve board thing going on where the widest point of its breadth is right at the pivot and it tapers down toward the butt. Gives you this wonderful, just wonderful grip. It just falls into your hand and says, "Cut with me, cut with me." Works great in this sort of modified hammer grip or pinch grip right on the bolster. And the saber grip, just a super positive, hard cutting grip. If you're going to draw cut with it, I've always said, guys, you can put all these cutouts and choils and contours in a knife handle, but God made the human hand to hold on to a stick. And this is a stick. It does have some corners. It is it's taller or broader than it is thick, so it doesn't want to turn in the human hand. But you have to have one of these in your hand to understand what I'm talking about. It's just perfect. Check out that Northwoods logo stamped into the rough blade. Deeply stamped, by the way. And then you've got a nail nick slot, but you really don't need it. It's really a pincher. You can do it sort of that overhand open or the underslung method. And do you hear the walk and talk? I mean, the half stop is so positive. And then listen to it close. Wham! And I'm not helping it. That's some serious walk and talk, isn't it? I mean, and you guys know that I'm a case knife person, but contrast what you just saw and heard with this. No real half stop on this case 3-blade Stockman. Kind of a different story, isn't it? You got to be careful if you're going to close this down to half stop. You better keep that index finger out of the way. See that thing bounce off the stop? You talk about an overbuilt folder. Here you go. What a wicked backspring. It's kind of neat too. When the knife is open, backspring is dead flush. When it's at the half stop, it's at dead flush. And when it's closed, it's dead flush. Pretty cool. Very well engineered traditional knife. It's just pretty amazing. I did have to take the time last evening to do what I do. And if you guys are watching closely, you'll see that I'm kind of going to have to do it again. I got snow on my back patio that I flattened my stones on, and they're not very flat. And sharpening a Wharncliffe with stones that weren't very flat was not a good idea. There's a little wavy thing going on in there. Look close, you'll see it. But did it take an edge? Wow. I'm actually not going to cut paper because that would be uncivilized with a knife like this. Take my word for it. And check out the moccasin. Let's see, this is sort of how it likes to go in. Just squeeze the sides and the knife is free. Let go of them and the knife is retained. Pretty cool. A lot like a Chris Reeve slip. This is a little more rigid than a Chris Reeve slip. And what a great thing, you know. You get the mail, you got maybe a Christmas card or a letter that's kind of important. You just gently slide this out of your pocket, leisurely, undo the envelope flap, slide the knife back into your hand, and open your mail. Like a gentleman, but like a gentleman with a little bit of attitude, don't you think? I, for one, am very, very happy to see the traditional knife art coming back into vogue, and I'm going to do my part to help it. That's why you guys get to see this video tonight. I really encourage you, whether it's with a $30 case or whether it's, you know, a $100 to $200 Northwoods or GEC, Great Eastern Cutlery knife, expose yourself to the traditional slip joint with some natural materials that look really cool. Get to know one, and then see if you can stop collecting them. You know, those of you who are Victorinox guys, you're not too far from knowing what I'm talking about. Isn't it cool? And did I mention it's really well built? I can't really overstate that. Just a little tank of a traditional slip joint. Does it look like it wants to cut? I think it does. Well, that's all for tonight, guys. I just thought you'd like to see that. I hope 2 or 3 of you enjoyed the video. I'm going to tuck it back away. I'll probably wipe down that plain carbon steel blade before I put it back in the safe. Don't worry, all you rust police. So, that's all for tonight. Hey, what is it? 8 days till Christmas. So Merry Christmas, my friends. Grace to you as well, and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word is sharp.